Paleoanthropologists and archaeologists are generally in agreement at this time that the human species went through several mutations, in all cases because there were severe changes in the climate and the weather, and the existing species did not adapt to it, and therefore the mutation occurred. We already acknowledged the fact that in the terminal ice age there was severe chaotic weather and loss of great animals. We changed from monsters to pygmies in a bottleneck in human population, and very possibly a mutation could have occurred, except that at that time we now had a human species that was complex tool making, and they used their complex tool making and the mirror neuron system that they inherited from the primates to create the decorated caves of Europe, which would be determined to restore springtime and its beneficence so the human species could continue without a mutation. And here we have the result of the mirror combination of the mirror neuron system and the complex tool making, and we now have produced the snake ring story, which we see here was a ritual and artistic endeavor to bring springtimes into balance. And as a result, when springtime did come back into balance, everything was stable in the culture until a new crisis befell. And we can look here at the world temperature, and we can see here what occurred about 3,500 years ago was a new dip in the average world temperature lasting several hundred years. And during that time, the need for crops and food was a severe one. What happened then was they went back to the civilizations to create civilizations for the purpose of maintaining springtimes. And the all appearances was that they were successful. For example, during this period of time here, we have civilizations coming up at each time when there was another threat of loss of springtime. As we see here, civilizations occurred for the first time 3,500 years ago. We have the great civilizations of Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Indus Valley all began, and they apparently brought things back into balance, or certainly it seemed that way. But then we had another crisis, even more severe than then, and we then had, in the New World, the Olmec civilization began as a mother culture to the Mayan and the others that followed it. And that was a response to a major dip and a major loss of springtimes, and it apparently brought things back into balance. And then we have, in the 1500s approximately, what we call the Little Ice Age. The Aztec civilization began, and the Americans, warlike, much more aggressive. We had the great cathedrals of Europe were created with much of the iconography of the snake ring story. And we had a period that only ended, as we see now, where we have normal weather, and one knows what will come if the weather threatens again. But we see here that the next threat did not come from the weather, but it came from new knowledge. What happened was that all of this time, civilizations were coming up, all faithful to the snake ring story, all placing themselves as a mirror image of what occurred here, and creating great monuments and pyramids, all in accordance with the mountain of the west horizon where they recreated springtime. But when the Ionian science came and discovered that the sun did not go around the earth, so we had a major rupture in belief. And what we had here was that the snake ring story maintained its images and its symbols, but the sun no longer went through the underworld. So we now had a sun that remained up in the sky, and we had the demon sun remaining in the underworld as a devil, and we have virtually everything else maintaining itself, except that we now have an everlasting sun up in the sky, or deity. and we have a underworld fraught with danger and a place of damnation and of death. Same as the dead son went into the underworld, we now believe that the dead go into the underworld. So we have now the split between the two. Whereas this was considered reality, we now have the reality that we have faith in religion as a branch, ongoing, maintaining the essence of the snake ring story, and we now have governments which before came out built on the snake ring story. They maintained the aspects of civilization, but they became secular in nature, and we now are fractured into two. We have a secular world, and we have a faith-based world, and we still have in our minds the snake ring story that preserved the human species from mutation. We still are complex toolmakers, and we still have a mirror neuron system in our mind to emulate what we did in the snake ring period. So we have here a consciousness that's made up of all of these elements.